on the phone back in Chicago, and she says she has a way of summing up an entire conversation with one sentence. And she said, I'll never forget it. She said, there's just something really attractive about a successful man.
Yeah.
I heard that. I said, fuck it. I'm just going to become successful. And that has paved the way for romantic relationships for me ever since. Just makes them flow so much better.
Yeah.
And yes, that's because I'm offering financial security or a better lifestyle or whatever. But isn't that what men offer?
Yes, but the thing is, financial security increases access, but it doesn't increase consistency from the woman. Because here's the thing, like I said to you, look, in my personal experience, the more successful a man is, the worse relationships get for him. But his access increases. He gets more, so he thinks it's almost like fast fashion. You can have more, but the quality is really bad. And here's why. Here's a couple of things that cause it. First of all, when he is hyper successful, he doesn't have the time to vet women properly. When you're when you're at home by 5 p.m. every day, you can see what she's up to from 5 p.m. every single day. And as a result, you get a real insight into what kind of human being she is. When you're running 2-3 businesses, you're flying from this area and that area, and she leaves you alone in those days, you're just like, oh, thank God she's not nagging me. No part of you is thinking, what is she doing in those 2-3 days that I'm away? How come I haven't heard from, what is she? So essentially what happens is they get worse at vetting a woman. They don't get an insight into her true character. So that's the first thing that happens. Now, women who are genuinely loyal, good women, they are incapable of being with men who are so busy. They need emotional connection daily and regularly in order for them to be loyal. So what happens is loyal women naturally can't attach to the man that doesn't know where he's going to, if he's going to be home on Christmas, is he going to be here or not in Thanksgiving. They attach to the man that says, okay, Wednesday we'll go to your mum's house and Friday we'll go here. And they attach to that man because they need consistency. They need emotional consistency. Disloyal women will be distant. So they don't mind if you're going away and going away, but she'll fill that void in some way, shape or form. Either through using your money and using it with luxury goods and think, oh, it doesn't matter, at least I get to go shopping. But after a while, how much can you buy? And then they form an attachment with their unemployed or a personal trainer who's available every day. So that happens, there's a disconnect. And the other thing that happens is they've got so much more to lose. When you get divorced as a successful man, I've seen successful men, move out of their beautiful homes into a little apartment while she moves in with her side man that she was sleeping with throughout the marriage, and they're living on his money, and he's funding that. And so I just think your access increases as you become successful, but your access to good women decreases.
Yeah, there's fewer available also.
Fewer available. They've weed themselves out. They don't have a lifestyle that's compatible with a man that's hyper successful. They usually are like home by a certain time, but the women that have a lifestyle that's compatible tend to be women who are either doing nothing, or they may have been in the sex industry at some point. They may have been in sex work at some point in the stage, because here's what they learn. They're always around successful men, usually sex workers. And the other thing they learn is if you tell them what they want to hear and then leave them alone, tell them what they want to hear, leave them alone, tell them what you want, leave them alone, you're like their perfect match. And they can play that role very well.
Romantic relationships are a minefield, aren't they?
Oh, I sound so negative and doom and gloom. Can I preface that by saying that's not true? I'm just saying this because worst case scenario. These are worst case scenario. Majority of relationships tend to be healthy, doable, because I'm talking about the 1%, the hyper successful man and the hyper beautiful woman. That's usually what I'm talking about when I'm talking about these things. It can transcend to the average person, but usually this is the scenario in that end. And the reason why I talk about them is because when you are a therapist, you only work with people who have disposable income. You only work with people who can afford to just pay for a conversation. So as a result, you get an insight into a different mindset. You don't get an insight into, the average man who might just be a teacher and his girlfriend is also a nurse. And so I have to make that very clear that I am talking about a minority.
It's so beautiful when you see an older couple in their 70s or 80s, and they're clearly still in love with each other.
Yeah, it is beautiful.
Such a beautiful thing.
What do you think is behind that?
I think maturity
Yeah.
on both sides, probably. You know, they understood that they are growing and changing and getting older, and they still accept and love each other and find each other interesting. My parents, who were married for, Jesus, so many decades I can't count, they always said, you know, my dad traveled a lot when he was working early in the relationship, and then my mom traveled a lot later when she found a new career and started working more. And they both said that time apart kept the whole thing going.
Oh, that's good.
Because it just keeps it fresh.
And I believe that like a healthy amount of distance is actually really good. The only problem is now we live in a time where distance invites the devil, because there's pornography or there's like, there's alternatives. But before it wouldn't necessarily lead to that. But now, because of the advent of the smartphone, distance can invite the devil.
What kind of things do you think, like as a man, I can tell you, like so many women think men just want sex. You give your man sex and he'll be happy. And I don't think that's accurate. I think what men really want is to feel appreciated.
I agree. I think that the core foundation behind every man and his core reason for cheating is a lack of appreciation. I see men cheating with women that are less attractive, or I see men cheating with or falling in love with women who are clearly not good for him. But because she made him feel appreciated and desired in a tiny way, he became attracted. And what I find with successful men, the reason why they cheat more is not so much, I wouldn't say they cheat more, but if there is an idea that they cheat more, I would honestly say it boils down to, because the more successful you become, the less appreciated they feel. Because what happens with the average man who's splitting the bills and they're splitting the housework, he doesn't feel he's deserving of as much appreciation. So say if she's not as grateful, it's not the end of the world. He might not also be so grateful. And they kind of can accept that. But when you're a man who's provided a really great life for your wife, and she's got a really luxury life and she's never had to work, or if she does work, it's only up to her, and she gets to travel the world in first class, and yet she can't even get you a glass of water when you need it, or can't even iron a shirt for you so you won't be late in the morning, or who resents cooking a meal for you, you feel less and less appreciated. And it's the lack of appreciation that leads to looking elsewhere. It's not novel sex. And that's what they'd like to think. And sometimes the men think that's what it is. They think I'm craving novelty and novelty sex, but then they'll attach to that one prostitute that made them a coffee after they finished, or they were attached to that one, co-worker that noticed that they cut their hair differently. So they're not actually seeking novel sex as much as they think they are.
What is it about sex workers that are makes them attractive to men?
Because they know how to work low self-esteem. With sex, just like how I have a very skewed vision of relationships because of the work I do, women who work with men who select sex workers can say every single one of them comes to them with either low self-esteem or loneliness. Something is driving them to this connection. And it's becoming more normalized, but essentially, usually those are the fundamental components. There's a low self-esteem, or there's a loneliness, or an inability to access the women that they find desirable on their own. They can't access that girl, so they'll pay for it. So when you know you're working with low self-esteem, they know exactly how to manipulate that and engineer that connection into one which they will fall in love. And they know exactly how to make that man fall in love. They know that it's simple compliments, telling them that they're so good at what they do, reminding them that they're so attractive. These kind of compliments, remember, most of these men haven't heard that naturally. So if you say it to them synthetically, they attach very quickly. And also they use the same lines as well. A lot of the sex workers will say, I hate this job, I wish I could get out of it. And he's thinking, I'll get you out of it. But she's thinking, oh, this is a lifelong career. In her mind, it's something you don't really come out of. It's very hard to come out of, because you lose. Here's the biggest thing that what sex work does is you no longer attach exclusivity and loyalty to sexual performance. So it becomes very difficult to see sex as that serious. Like if I have sex with another man, why? It's not that serious. In their mind, they kind of reduce the significance of sex so much that it becomes easy to cheat.
I think it's impossible for these girls to go back to just a regular...
No, monogamy is impossible. And intimacy is impossible. Intimacy is very, very impossible. And I tell you what I really think it is, when a woman has been a sex worker, and you as a man know that she's been a sex worker and you fall in love with her, in her mind, she knows what she's been doing. And in her mind, she knows the depravity that she's been through. She can't believe you love her. And if you do love her, you must love a different version of her, because if you knew the true her, you would not be able to attach to it. So part of her feels like, it's not real when somebody tries to love them.
I heard you say once, like, she has a hard time respecting a man who is going to pay her for sex. And that's why so many of these girls end up with pimps, because that's the only man that she can respect.
Yeah, I did say that. Well, in my personal experience of working with them, I work with girls who have OnlyFans. And it's so funny to me. I'll have an OnlyFans model, and she might be making 80,000 a month. 70% of it goes to her boyfriend, because he's the one that's in charge of the OnlyFans. He's the one that's got all the hired the bots and drove the traffic. 70% goes to him, and he'll use that money and start sleeping with other girls. And she's hugely loyal to him. Like, she's obsessed with him. Now, if this is a woman who's got an OnlyFans, she's obviously beautiful, and she obviously has options. There's men paying for her, but she's fiercely loyal to the man that is taking all her money. And she's fiercely loyal to her boyfriend. And the reason being is she has far more respect for the man that refuses to pay for the OnlyFans but will take money from her. But the man that might be subscribing would actually treat her well. She would think, you're an idiot. You can't respect the man that has to pay for you, to access you. You can't respect that. You'd rather respect the man that you have to pay. And this is something I always tell men, because there's a lot of talk that, women just want financial security. They all want that. But when women are truly attracted to a man, they pay for him. They'll get an Uber to his house in the middle of the night. They'll bring food to him. He won't have to spend a penny. It's the more attracted she is, the less you have to invest financially.
I interviewed an old, slightly older sex worker, prostitute, and she said something that I thought was really fascinating. She said that criminalizing a woman's ability to monetize society's most valuable commodity is just a way to keep women powerless.
I disagree because...
Yeah, I don't buy it 100%, but there's it's certainly an interesting thing to say.
I get what she's trying to say, like, don't make me a criminal because I'm finally using my power. But the reason why I disagree with, I think we need to criminalize prostitution, but I actually think we need to criminalize the men that pay. And the reason I say it is they are just rapists with loopholes. Because the mentality is still the same. You're seeking a woman that doesn't want to have sex with you.
What about the wives that are no longer interesting?
I understand that, but if you're a man of caliber, you'll still select a mistress, not a sex worker.
Oh, I see.
If you're a man of caliber and your wife is no longer interesting, you will still find a mistress. She'll come to you. And the reason why I think the issue is more the men that pay than the women that monetize is the men that pay, they are still essentially trying to access a woman who doesn't want them. She's given you permission because you put money in an envelope, but she doesn't truly want you. And then what you're doing is you're paying for violation. You are now putting money in an envelope, and now you can violate this woman as much as you want. And yes, she's agreed, so you've got that permission. But the mindset is still that of a rapist. You're paying a stranger who wouldn't normally want to have sex with you to now have sex with you because you have manipulated consent. Yes, she's agreeing to it, but most healthy women don't agree to that. So you are taking advantage of her traumas, you're taking advantage of her poor financial decisions, you're taking advantage of her low self-esteem and using that as a way to pleasure yourself. I just think the mindset is still similar to that of men that would have, 200 years ago when this wasn't as available, would have been that man that broke into somebody's house and taken it. And a lot of men would say, no, it's nothing like that. And I agree. I know I'm being extreme. It's not like that because you found a loophole. But the underlying mindset I find similar. Usually it's men who might be, look, I don't know what they like. And nowadays I think it's become very common. But usually there is a considerable age gap. There's a considerable gap in attractiveness, or there's a considerable gap in performance. One thing I notice is young men who pay for escorts, young men. As you get older, I can understand it's far more convenient, and why would you go on a date with a woman who's 50, who's going to be hard work and not that great in bed, when you can do the same with a 22-year-old, and it makes total sense. I do understand. Rationally, it makes total sense.
I can tell you as a as an older male, it's crazy how many guys that are older and married
Yeah.
that have little things on the side.
Yeah, and paid situations.
Probably.
Yeah, they have, and I
I don't know
completely
all the
understand.
details, but
Yeah, and I understand that because sometimes I'll meet men who are older, and you'll go on a date with a woman that's maybe 40, 50, and she's so jaded and so negative, and then he's just like, oh, and she's so difficult, and then he's just like, I actually don't care enough to start a marriage with somebody. I just want to have a nice vacation with a girl. So I can understand why he does that. But I would say young men, in my experience, I've worked with some young men who have an addiction to escorts. And whenever, like, a wife might come to me and her husband's maybe 30 years old, handsome enough, not terrible, and he's going to escorts, the first question I say to the woman, I say, is he bad in bed? And she says, well, I haven't got much experience. I go, he's bad in bed. I said, I promise you he's not good at sex. And she'd say, do you think so? I don't personally have that much experience, so I don't know. I'm used to him. And I said, look, I promise you in this day and age, a 32-year-old man can jump on Tinder and find a girl that day. If he's resorting to escorts, he has either a porn addiction or he's not good. He's not good at sex. And he wants to bypass the feedback. He wants to skip the feedback women give you. In the real world, which is very harsh, by the way, in the real world, what happens is, particularly when you're like 30 to 35 or 20 to whatever, young boys, girls can tell you. They're shameless. They'll say to you, or they'll imply that they're not pleased with what you're doing. They'll imply it by never calling you again. They'll imply it by getting back with an ex. They'll imply it by their facial expression, whatever it is. They'll imply their satisfaction. Men who have received negative feedback more than once will then skip that and go to an escort. If they, when you're older, slightly different reasons behind it. But young men who are going to